The galaxy was vast, filled with ancient empires and endless wonders, but also haunted by dark shadows moving silently between the stars. For countless ages, alien races had ruled the void. They had built fleets that stretched across systems, cities that floated on gas giants, and towers of crystal that touched the heavens. Humanity was the youngest member of this grand alliance, a small voice in a hall of giants. To most, Earth was just a fragile world with fragile people. But the warnings came. The first to speak were the Zalari, tall beings of light and crystal, their forms glowing with the pulse of energy. They appeared before the Galactic Council with trembling voices. "The Vair are awake," they said. "The machines are moving again. They will come for every star, every world. You must flee." Their words spread like wildfire. The Vair were a name whispered in fear, a nightmare of living, machines that devoured entire planets. They left nothing behind, only dust and silence. Entire species had vanished under their swarm. To the elder races, they were death itself. When the council gathered, the chamber was filled with panic. The Surth hissed through forked tongues, their serpentine bodies coiling in fear. The Thalmar clicked their insectoid mandibles, demanding retreat to safer territories. Even the proud Zalari spoke of abandoning whole sectors to survive. Fear wrapped around every voice, crushing hope before it could rise. And then came humanity. They were new to the stars, only a few decades beyond their home system. They had no ancient fleets, no crystal palaces, no sacred technologies inherited from forgotten gods. They were ordinary by galactic measure, short-lived, fragile, impulsive. The Council had accepted them only as a courtesy, a gesture to encourage growth. Yet, when the debate of retreat filled the chamber, a single human stood and spoke. Her name was Captain Mara Solis. She was not old, not famous, not a voice the galaxy respected, but her eyes burned with a fire none could ignore. "Run," she said. Her voice echoed across the council. "Run, and leave behind our homes, our children, our future. We humans have lived through storms, wars, and disasters. We do not run. We stand." Laughter spread among the Surth. The Thalmar clattered, their mandibles in mockery. The Zalari looked upon her with sorrow, as if watching a child too young to understand death. "You do not know the Vair," said a Surth elder, his voice hissing like venom. "You think your tiny warships can stop them? They will crush you, as the tide crushes sand." But Mara only looked at him with steady eyes. "Maybe we are sand," she said. "But enough sand, in the right storm, can bury even mountains." The council dismissed her words. To them, humanity was reckless, blind to the scale of the threat. They saw humans as a species that had barely left its cradle, daring to shout in a hall of giants. Yet, when the meeting ended and the races prepared to flee, humanity returned home with determination carved into their hearts. On Earth, under the pale light of the moon, the great ships began to rise. They had been hidden from the galaxy, built in silence over decades. They were not just ships. They were motherships, massive titans of steel and fire. Each was a moving city, carrying thousands of souls, forges, gardens, and weapons. They were built not for retreat, but for survival through defiance. The Atlas was the first, a fortress of iron and thunder. The Leviathan followed, vast as a continent, its cannons like mountains. The Odyssey soared last, elegant and swift, built to carry hope across the stars. Together, they were humanity's answer to the warnings. When the motherships rose from Earth's atmosphere, the skies burned with their engines. Billions watched from the surface, hearts swelling with pride and fear. Children clung to their parents, pointing at the titans that vanished into the night. Farmers, workers, and dreamers alike whispered the same truth. This was not flight. This was defiance. In the dark of space, the crews prepared. Mara stood on the bridge of the Atlas, staring at the starfields ahead. Her officers gathered, Lieutenant Ishan Velez, sharp-eyed and restless, Dr. Kira Den, calm and thoughtful, keeper of science and wisdom, and Commander Ryu Kale, strong and unbending, whose voice could silence a room. They were young, like their species, but their hearts beat with stubborn fire. "Do you believe we can win?" Ishan asked quietly. Mara's gaze never left the stars. "We do not need to believe," she said. "We need to fight." Far beyond, in the silence between galaxies, the Vaer stirred. Their ships were not ships at all, but black living machines. They moved like swarms of locusts, darkening the suns they passed. They heard no pleas, felt no mercy. To them, all life was fuel. And now, their gaze turned toward the small blue planet that dared to answer back. The aliens had given their warnings. They had begged for retreat, for silence, for surrender. But humanity's answer was different. It was steel and courage. It was fire burning against the dark. It was the rising thunder of motherships. And in that moment, though the galaxy still doubted, though the council still mocked, the first seeds of fear began to bloom in the hearts of the Vaer. For they had faced countless enemies across countless ages, but they had never faced humans. And humans, once pushed to the edge, never simply survived. They endured. They fought. They changed the very rules of survival. The warnings had been spoken, but humanity's answer was only beginning. The stars were quiet, but silence was never peace. Every scout report, every trembling message carried the same truth. The Vaer were moving closer. Systems on the outer rim had already gone dark, their worlds consumed, their people lost without a trace. Entire colonies had sent desperate calls for help, but only silence followed. Inside the command chamber of the Atlas, Captain Mara Solis studied the glowing map of the galaxy. Red lights marked the systems already fallen. More red spread each week, like fire devouring dry grass. She stood still, jaw tight, eyes sharp, as her officers gathered around her. Lieutenant Ishan Velez leaned forward on the table, restless energy, sparking in his movements. "We can't fight them head-on," he muttered. "Their numbers are endless. Every time we destroy one, 10 more appear. It's like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket." Dr. Kira Den shook her head, her calm, voice cutting through the tension. "Every predator has a pattern. The Vaer are not gods. They are machines. Machines learn, but machines can also be tricked. We must find a weakness." Commander Ryu Kale stood with arms crossed, his face carved from stone. "Weakness or not, we cannot wait. Every day we spend talking, more worlds are lost. Humanity must act before the fire reaches Earth." Mara listened in silence, then placed her hand on the map. Her fingers hovered over the red-marked systems, the scars of the Vaer's advance. "The Alliance has already chosen fear," she said. "They scatter and hide, but we will not scatter. We will not hide. If the Vaer want to devour the stars, then humanity will be the storm that meets them." Her words settled into the hearts of her crew like fire in dry wood. Far away, the council still argued. In their towering halls of glass and crystal, the elder races debated escape routes and evacuation plans. The Surth hissed of hiding within their cavern worlds. The Thalmar demanded treaties with other predators for protection. Even the Zalari, with their shining wisdom, spoke of surrendering sectors of space to buy time. When humanity's ambassadors demanded unity, the chamber filled with laughter and scorn. "You cannot fight them," hissed the Surth. "You are small, short-lived." "You think courage can stop a tide?" Ambassador Alara Quinn, her voice steady and eyes unyielding, answered them with words that silenced even the proudest alien. "Maybe you are right," she said. Maybe humanity is small, but we have built fires in the coldest nights. We have crossed oceans with nothing but fragile wood. We have survived storms that should have ended us. Courage alone does not stop the tide, but courage teaches us how to swim, and sometimes how to turn waves into weapons. The chamber grew silent, but the council still chose retreat. Humanity stood alone. Back on the Leviathan, engineers worked day and night. Sparks flew as workers hammered steel, welded armor, and loaded weapons. The ship was alive with voices, mechanics, laughing through exhaustion, pilots sharpening their focus, children playing in the safe quarters built deep within the hull. Humanity had not only built ships of war, but ships of survival. These motherships carried families, culture, and memory. They were not only weapons, they were the very soul of Earth, forged into steel. One night, as the hum of engines filled the air, Mara walked the observation deck. She saw faces pressed against the glass, children pointing at the stars, mothers whispering lullabies, old men telling stories of Earth's oceans and forests. Her chest ached with pride and fear. These people were her responsibility. If the motherships fell, humanity's fire would die with them. Ishan joined her, his sharp eyes softened by the sight. "Do you ever doubt?" he asked quietly. Mara turned. To him, her face lit by the glow of stars. "Every day," she admitted. "But doubt does not matter. What matters is that we stand, even when fear tells us to kneel." Then came the first true clash. The colony of Lyrian was the line between survival and ruin. Its twin suns lit vast oceans and silver plains, a jewel of life on the rim. But when the Vair came, the sky darkened with their swarms. Black ships, shaped like blades and crawling with machine limbs, fell upon the world with merciless hunger. The Alliance sent a fleet, but fear broke them. Their formations crumbled, their commanders hesitated, and within hours, the fleet was torn apart. Cities on Lyrian screamed as fire rained from the sky. But then shadows larger than mountains entered orbit. Humanity's motherships had arrived, the Yi. Atlas roared with cannon fire, each shot like thunder across the void. The Leviathan unleashed broadside barrages that split the swarm apart. From the Odyssey poured hundreds of smaller craft, darting through chaos with reckless speed. The humans did not fight like the Alliance. They did not hold rigid lines. They danced. They gambled. They adapted. For the first time, the Vair faltered. On the bridge, Kira's calm voice carried through the storm. They hesitate. They are not used to enemies who fight with chaos. Ishan grinned, fire in his eyes. Then let's give them chaos. Mara stood tall, her voice steady as steel. All ships, press forward. Show them what it means to face humanity. The battle raged for hours. The seas of Lyrian boiled under falling wrecks. The sky glowed with fire and ash. But when the smoke cleared, the Vair were gone. Not destroyed, but driven back, forced to retreat from a world they had already begun to claim. The price was heavy. Hundreds of human pilots never returned. Entire sections of the motherships were scarred, burning with loss. Yet, as the survivors gathered, voices rose in pride. Humanity had done what the galaxy thought impossible. They had made the Vair retreat. And, in that moment, across every ship, across every soul, one truth echoed louder than fear. The warnings had told them to run. But humanity had answered back with fire. And this was only the beginning. The victory at Lyrion spread like a storm across the stars. For the first time in generations, the galaxy whispered not of despair, but of hope. Hope had a new name, humanity. The motherships had stood against the Vair, and the Vair had retreated. Yet, the council was uneasy. In the shining chambers of glass, the elder races spoke in hushed voices. The Cirth coiled nervously, their golden scales flickering in the light. This victory was luck, they hissed. A single spark before the flood. The Vare will return stronger than ever. The Thalmar clattered their insectoid wings in fear. If we provoke them further, they will devour us all. Humanity has brought danger upon the Alliance. Even the Zalari, who had once admired courage, spoke with sorrow. One victory does not win a war. You have awakened their gaze. The storm will fall on you first. But humanity did not bow to fear. On board the Atlas, Captain Mara Solis stood in the war room, her officers gathered close. The holographic map displayed new movements. Vare swarms gathering along the silent rift, a stretch of dead space filled with asteroids and shattered moons. "They're massing," said Commander Ryu Kael, his deep voice heavy. "They mean to break through the rift. If they succeed, nothing will stand between them and Earth." Lieutenant Ishan Velez clenched his fists. "Then we don't wait for them to strike. We hit them first." Dr. Kira Den adjusted her glasses, her calm voice steady. "Direct assault is suicide. But there is another way. The rift is unstable. Asteroid fields, plasma storms, gravity traps. Dangerous for us, yes, but dangerous for them as well. If we can lure the swarm into chaos, we may turn their strength against them." Mara's eyes burned with decision. "Then we fight on our ground, not theirs. Humanity has always thrived in chaos. We will make the rift our battlefield." Preparation began at once. The motherships moved through the void, carrying thousands of lives, hearts beating as one. Pilots trained day and night, weaving through simulations of fire and debris. Engineers rewired weapons, turning mining lasers into cannons, turning fuel, tanks into bombs. Every person, from soldier to child, carried the weight of survival. In the safe quarters of the Leviathan, children painted stars on the walls, pretending they were explorers, not refugees. Mothers sang lullabies to silence the fear. Old men told stories of Earth's forests, of oceans that stretched farther than sight. Even in the heart of war, humanity remembered to dream. Mara walked the corridors, her presence calm, her voice steady. She spoke to mechanics with grease-stained hands, to medics with tired eyes, to soldiers sharpening their blades. Each one looked at her and saw not only a captain, but a leader who carried their hope. At last, the day came. The Vare swarmed into the silent rift, their black ships moving like a tide of blades. Thousands upon thousands, each one a machine of hunger. Their advance darkened the stars, but waiting in the shadows, hidden among the asteroids, were the motherships. The Atlas led the charge, its cannons blazing through the void. The Leviathan emerged from the plasma storms, its armor glowing red, unleashing fire that split the swarm apart. From the Odyssey poured fighters, darting like sparks, weaving through chaos with reckless grace. The rift became a storm. Asteroids shattered, plasma arcs ripped across the void, gravity wells tore ships apart. The Vare struggled, their order breaking as they chased humanity into the storm. Ashan's voice rang out on comms, fierce with energy. "Now, strike the weak points!" Kira triggered hidden charges planted on drifting asteroids. Explosions lit the void, shards of rock tearing through machine hulls. The swarm buckled. Mara stood tall on the bridge, her voice calm yet fierce. "Push forward! Show them the fire of Earth!" The battle raged like no other. Human ships darted in impossible maneuvers, risking everything with each move. Fighters sacrificed themselves to shield the motherships. Entire crews gave their lives to trigger traps that tore through enemy lines. The Vare had never faced such resistance. They had crushed empires, silenced worlds, and consumed fleets. But here, in the silent rift, they bled. For hours, the void burned. When the dust began to clear, the Vare swarm was broken. Not destroyed, but shattered, forced to retreat once again. But victory carried its price. The Atlas floated scarred, its decks torn open, hundreds lost in fire. The Odyssey limped with engines failing, smoke filling its halls. The Leviathan bled from wounds that would take months to heal. Across the rift, wreckage drifted, human and Vare alike, silent graves in the endless dark. Mara walked the halls of the Atlas, passing the wounded, hearing the cries of loss. She stopped by the observation deck where survivors had gathered. Some wept, some stood in silence, all carried the weight of sacrifice. She spoke softly, her voice carrying strength, even in sorrow. We have lost much, friends, family, brothers, and sisters in arms. But their fire does not die here. It burns in us. It burns in every ship that still stands. The Vare thought us fragile. They thought us weak, but we are still here, and we will not stop. Her words lit the room like a spark. In the dark, tears turned to resolve. Silence turned to strength. Humanity had taken another step into legend. Across the galaxy, the story spread. The Council listened in disbelief. The Cirth hissed in anger. The Thalmar clicked in fear. The Zalari bowed their shining heads, whispering, "Perhaps the humans are not as fragile as we thought." For the first time, the galaxy began to wonder. Perhaps humanity was not just another young race doomed to fall. Perhaps they were something more, something the Vare had never faced before, something unbreakable. The silent rift was quiet once more. Broken ships drifted in the dark like ghosts, their twisted hulls glowing faintly with dying fire. Humanity had survived another battle, and the Vare had been forced back. But victory brought no peace. Instead, it carried new storms. On the Atlas, Captain Mara Solis stood at the bridge window, watching the wreckage scatter like ashes across the void. The faces of the fallen haunted her, pilots who had laughed days before, engineers who had promised to see Earth again, children whose laughter would never echo in the safe quarters. She pressed her hand against the glass, whispering a silent vow. Their sacrifice would not be in vain. Lieutenant Ishan Velez broke the silence. "The Alliance has sent word. They're calling another council meeting." His voice carried tension. "They want to discuss our methods." Mara turned, her eyes hard. "Our methods?" Dr. Kira Den sighed softly, her calm voice filled with weariness. "The Council is afraid. They see our victories, but they do not understand them. They fear we are provoking the Vare further." Commander Ryu Kyle growled, his fists clenched. "We fight for survival, and they fear our defiance more than they fear extinction." When the Council gathered, the chamber pulsed with unease. The Cirth hissed from their thrones, their golden eyes narrowed. "Humanity plays with fire," one elder declared. "The more you fight, the more the Vare will notice us all. You endanger the galaxy." The Thalmar clicked their mandibles, voices sharp. "You throw yourselves at the swarm like reckless insects. Already your battles cause destruction that spreads beyond your control." The Zalari, glowing like crystal, flames, spoke with sorrow. "We respect your courage, but courage without wisdom brings ruin. You must not fight every battle alone." Mara stood before them, her voice steady, her presence commanding despite the disdain around her. "You speak of fear. We speak of survival. If humanity falls, the Vare will not stop. They will come for you next. Do you think retreat will save you? Do you think surrender will buy mercy? No. The only language they understand is resistance." Her words cut through the chamber like fire. But instead of applause, silence spread. The Council did not rise to support her. Instead, whispers passed from one alien to another, shadows of suspicion forming in the air. Humanity was no longer seen as weak. Humanity was seen as dangerous. That night, Mara met with Ambassador Alara Quinn in the quiet halls of the Odyssey. The ambassador's face was tired, her eyes shadowed by heavy truth. "They do not trust us," Alara admitted. "The Cirth and Thalmar have already spoken of limiting our fleets. They say humanity is unpredictable, unstable. They fear we will drag the Alliance into full war." Mara clenched her jaw. "We are already in full war." Alara hesitated, then lowered her voice. "There are rumors. Some factions are considering a pact with the Vair, an attempt to buy peace by offering sacrifices." The words struck like ice. Mara stepped closer, her voice sharp. "Sacrifices? You mean worlds?" Alara nodded slowly. "Yes. They would give the Vair border colonies, planets they see as expendable. They believe it will delay the storm." Ryukale's rage shook the room. "They would sell their own people to survive?" Kira's calm voice trembled with rare anger. "That is not survival. That is surrender wrapped in betrayal." Mara's eyes burned. "If they betray us, if they betray the galaxy, then humanity will stand alone." But betrayal did not wait for words. It came with action. Weeks later, scouts brought a report that chilled every heart aboard the Motherships. A human colony, Haven Prime, had been abandoned by the Alliance fleet meant to defend it. The Cirth commanders had withdrawn, leaving the colony exposed. Within hours, the Vair descended. By the time humanity's ships arrived, it was too late. Haven Prime was gone. Millions of lives erased. Only wreckage and silence remained. On the bridge of the Leviathan, Mara's fists shook as she stared at the broken world. Her officers stood in grief-stricken silence. "They left them," Ishan whispered, his voice trembling with fury. "They left them to die." Ryu slammed his hand against the table. "The Alliance has chosen fear over honor." Kira's eyes glistened with sorrow. This was not the Vair alone. This was betrayal. News of Haven Prime spread like fire. Across human fleets, anger turned into steel. Soldiers painted the names of the fallen on their armor. Pilots vowed never to leave. Another world undefended. Entire crews whispered oaths of defiance in the dark halls of their ships. Humanity had always fought with heart, but now heart was joined with fury. Mara stood before her people, her voice carrying through the Motherships. "The Alliance has forgotten what it means to stand together. They abandoned Haven Prime. But we will not abandon anyone. We are humanity. We carry the fire of Earth. We do not bend. We do not bow. And we do not break. The Vair will learn this truth. And the Alliance will see it too." Her words rippled through the fleets, filling tired souls with fire once more. But in the shadows, the Vair listened. The swarm did not speak with voices, but their dark minds connected in silent unity. They studied humanity's defiance, their unpredictable strategies, their reckless bravery. For the first time in their endless hunger, they hesitated, not out of fear, but curiosity. The humans were different. They were not like the others who had fallen. They did not scatter when threatened. They did not bow when crushed. They burned brighter in the face of death. And so, deep within the black abyss of the swarm, the Vair chose a new path. They would not simply devour humanity. They would test them, break them, learn from them. The storm was only growing darker. The destruction of Haven Prime became a scar across humanity's heart. It was not only the loss of millions of lives, but the betrayal that cut deeper than any wound. The Alliance had turned its back on them. Yet, instead of falling into despair, the human spirit hardened like steel in fire. On board the Atlas, Captain Mara Solis stood before her crew. Her voice carried across the comms, reaching every corridor, every chamber of the Motherships. "Haven Prime is gone," she said, her tone, steady though her heart trembled with grief. "Not because of the Vair alone, but because those who should have stood with us chose to run. We cannot change the past, but we can honor the fallen. We will fight not just for Earth, not just for ourselves, but for every world abandoned by fear. Humanity will be their shield. Her words lit a spark in every soul. Mechanics hammered harder, pilots trained longer, soldiers stood straighter. Humanity's resolve burned brighter than ever before. Far away in the halls of the council, unrest spread. The Surth defended their betrayal with cold words. It was a necessary sacrifice, they hissed. The Thalmar clicked in agreement. One world lost to save dozens more. But even within the council, cracks formed. Some alien voices rose in shame and anger. A young Zalari envoy whispered to his elders, "The humans do what we should have done. They fight, even when all seems lost. Perhaps it is we who are blind." Still, the council remained divided. Fear chained them while humanity prepared for war. The Veer, too, had changed. In the silent abyss, their black fleets moved with strange purpose. They were not rushing forward in endless waves as before. They were studying, adapting, testing. Their dark intelligence had shifted its gaze fully onto humanity. On the Leviathan, Dr. Kira Den studied intercepted signals, strange pulses and patterns hidden within the swarm. Her brow furrowed as she traced the rhythms. "They are learning," she whispered. "Every time we fight them, they adjust. They are not mindless machines. They are evolving because of us." Ishan's restless voice cut in. "So what? Let them learn. We'll just keep fighting harder." Kira shook her head. "This is not about strength alone. If we give them enough battles, they will know us as well as we know ourselves." Mara listened quietly, then placed her hand on the table. "Then we must fight differently. If they study us, let us give them chaos they cannot predict." Soon after, the call for aid came again. The colony of Vera's Edge was under attack. Unlike Haven Prime, humanity would not arrive too late. The motherships jumped through the void, their massive frames shimmering against the stars. As they entered the system, they saw the swarm descending upon the planet. The sky glowed red as fire consumed the atmosphere. The Veer ships, sharp, black, endless, poured toward the surface like falling knives. "Engage!" Mara commanded. The Atlas unleashed storms of plasma fire. The Leviathan's cannons roared, splitting enemy lines. The Odyssey danced through the void, releasing squadrons of fighters that streaked into the swarm. But this time, the Veer were different. They shifted tactics mid-battle, weaving unpredictable patterns, countering maneuvers they had never used before. Their formations mirrored the very chaos humanity had once used to confuse them. "They're copying us," Ishan shouted from the tactical console. "Then we change again," Mara said firmly. "All squadrons, improvise. Do what humans do best. Adapt faster." The battle became a storm of madness. Pilots turned asteroids into weapons, slingshotting debris into enemy ranks. Engineers overloaded engines to create blinding bursts of light, disorienting the swarm. Entire crews acted on instinct, making choices that no computer, no machine could ever predict. And for a time, it worked. The Veer faltered against the raw unpredictability of human courage. Fighters streaked through. Impossible gaps. Damaged ships used their last breath to tear open enemy hulls. Every second of resistance was carved with sacrifice. But the cost was heavy. The Odyssey took a direct hit, its shields shattered, fires spreading across its decks. On board, families huddled in the safe quarters, whispering prayers. Engineers fought through smoke to keep the engines alive. Mara's voice reached them through the comms. "Hold the line," she urged. "Every second you survive, every breath you take, you buy the galaxy more time." Hours passed, and at last the swarm retreated. The humans had held Vera's Edge, but the victory felt hollow. The Odyssey limped in orbit, scarred and bleeding. Hundreds of lives were lost. In the silence after battle, the cries of grief filled the motherships. Mara walked the medical bay, her boots echoing on the steel floor. She saw soldiers missing limbs, children wrapped in bandages, medics working with trembling hands. Yet even among the wounded, she saw no surrender. Eyes filled with pain also carried fire. One young pilot, barely 18, gripped Mara's hand with a blood-stained glove. "Captain," he whispered, his voice weak. "Did we win?" Mara knelt, her voice steady. "Yes, because you stood, because you fought." The boy smiled faintly before sleep claimed him. Across the stars, the story of Vera's Edge spread. More voices within the Alliance began to stir. Some whispered admiration, others envy, but none could ignore the truth. Humanity, the youngest and smallest of them all, was standing where ancient empires had crumbled. But in the depths of space, the Vere prepared their next move. They had tested, they had learned, and now they sought to break humanity not with force alone, but with cunning. For the first time in history, the swarm set a trap, and humanity, scarred but unbroken, was marching straight toward it. The scars of Vera's Edge were still fresh when the call for help came again. This time, the distress signal came from the mining colonies near the Nabora Rift, a place of broken suns and drifting debris fields. The humans, though weary, answered, without hesitation. On board the Atlas, Captain Mara Solis stared at the star map. The rift shimmered like a wound across the galaxy, a place of unstable gravity and unpredictable storms. Yet reports spoke of civilians trapped, colonies under. "Attack!" Her crew waited for her command. Mara's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the storm within. "We cannot leave them. Set a course. Prepare the fleet." The Atlas, Leviathan, and the scarred Odyssey jumped through the void, their engines, burning against the cold abyss. The rift was strange, beautiful, and deadly. Stars shattered long ago still drifted as fragments glowing like frozen fire in the endless dark. Massive asteroids turned slowly, their surfaces cracked and jagged. Energy storms rippled across the void, twisting light into ghostly patterns. Was there, hidden among the debris, that the Vere waited? Their ships were silent, their black hulls blending with shadow. They had studied the humans, learned their movements, and chosen this graveyard as the perfect snare. Dr. Kira Den stood at her console, watching the sensor screens flicker. The rift interfered with readings, scattering signals. Still, her instincts whispered danger. "Something is wrong," she murmured. Ishan, ever restless, leaned forward. "Wrong how?" "The signals," she replied softly. "They are too clean, too obvious. The distress call, it almost feels designed." Mara listened in silence, her jaw tight. She had learned to trust Kira's caution. Yet the thought of ignoring civilians was unbearable. Humanity had already lost too many. "We move forward," she decided, "but with care. No risks we do not understand." As the fleet advanced, the trap was sprung. The debris field shifted. Massive fragments, guided by hidden Vere machines, slammed together, sealing paths of escape. From the shadows, the swarm emerged, more ships than ever before. Their dark hulls gleamed like blades, their movements precise, calculated. "Ambush!" cried a voice across the comms. The void lit up with fire. Plasma beams and missiles cut through the dark. The Atlas shook under the first assault. The Odyssey, still wounded from the last battle, strained against the storm. Mara gripped the rail. "All ships, defensive formations, protect the civilians." But the civilians were nowhere to be seen. The distress call had been nothing but bait. Chaos followed. The Vere struck with brutal intelligence. They targeted engines first, crippling movement. They swarmed from angles the humans had never faced before. The rift itself turned into an enemy, its storms ripping through shields and throwing ships into each other. On the Leviathan, alarms screamed. Fires spread across the engineering decks, yet Dr. Kira Den refused to panic. Her mind raced, studying the enemy's new patterns. She whispered to herself, "They are too perfect, too clean. Machines follow logic. We must give them something that defies it." She sent a message to Mara. "Captain, let us use the rift itself. Feed chaos into their order. The storms, they can't predict them as we can. Humans live with chaos. We can ride it. They cannot." Mara's eyes lit with determination. "Do it!" The humans changed their tactics. Instead of fleeing the storms, they dove into them. Pilots pushed ships into currents of twisted gravity, using unstable fields to sling their fighters across impossible distances. The Atlas itself charged into a storm, its shields screaming as energy crackled across its hull. The Veer followed, but their perfection betrayed them. Their movements, so flawless in the open void, faltered in chaos. Ships collided with debris. Calculations failed. They could not bend to madness as humans could. Still, the cost was terrible. The Odyssey groaned under the strain. Whole decks went dark. Families huddled as emergency lights flickered. Commander Hale, its leader, made a grim choice. He opened a channel to Mara. "Captain, we cannot hold, but we can still serve." Mara's heart clenched. "Hale, don't—" But his voice was steady. "You said once that every second we fight buys hope. Let the Odyssey buy it." Before she could answer, the Odyssey turned, engines burning bright. With its last strength, it rammed into the heart of the swarm. The explosion lit the rift like a newborn star. Hundreds of Veer ships shattered in the blaze. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sobs of those who had called the Odyssey home. The humans, scarred and bleeding, seized the moment. The Atlas and Leviathan pressed forward, tearing through the scattered remains of the swarm. The rift's storms finished what the humans began, pulling wreckage into oblivion. When the last Veer ship fell, the battlefield was quiet. Only drifting debris remained, mixed with the broken pieces of the Odyssey. Later, in the War Council chamber of the Atlas, Mara faced her crew. Their eyes were hollow, but their spirits unbroken. "The Odyssey is gone," she said, her voice heavy. "But her sacrifice is not. The Veer wanted to break us with their trap. But we showed them that chaos does not defeat us. It makes us stronger. Humanity does not bow, even in the rift," Kira added softly. "And perhaps now the Veer understand something they cannot copy. We are not just logic. We are not just survival. We are sacrifice. We are love. That is what makes us impossible to predict." Her words lingered, sinking into every heart. Far away, across the galaxy, whispers spread. The Council could no longer dismiss humanity as reckless children. Stories of the Odyssey's sacrifice reached even the coldest worlds. Some alien races wept in shame, others in awe, and in the silent depths where the Veer gathered, something shifted. They had studied strength. They had studied tactics. But sacrifice, this was new. Something they could not compute. For the first time, the swarm hesitated, but the war was far from over. The wreckage of the Odyssey still floated in the Nabora rift, glowing faintly like shattered glass among the storms. Survivors of the battle carried its memory in their hearts. Every deck of the human fleet whispered the same truth. Humanity had paid a terrible price, but they had survived the impossible. On the Atlas, Captain Mara Solis stood alone in her quarters. The faint hum of the ship was steady, but her mind was not. She replayed Hale's last words again and again. His voice was calm, steady, almost peaceful. He had walked willingly into death so others might live. Mara pressed her hand to the cold window, staring at the endless stars. "I will not waste what you gave us," she whispered. The War Council assembled the next day. Leaders from other species joined through shimmering hollow projections, their alien faces unreadable. The High Chancellor of the Zareth, with eyes like burning suns, spoke first. "Humans," he said, his tone sharp. "Your recklessness nearly destroyed your fleet. You should have retreated." Mara lifted her head, fire in her voice. "If we had retreated, the Vair would have grown stronger. They wanted us to flee. They wanted us broken. Instead, we showed them we will not bow." A ripple spread through the council chamber. Some aliens nodded slowly, while others hissed in disapproval. They still did not understand sacrifice the way humans did. Dr. Kira Den leaned forward. "You call it recklessness. We call it courage. The Odyssey fell, yes, but in her fall, she saved thousands. Do your histories not remember such things?" Silence followed. For a moment, even the proudest species could not answer. Among the fleet, grief turned into something else. On the Leviathan, families lit small lanterns in the hangars, releasing them to float through the artificial gravity like glowing tears. Soldiers stood in silence, heads bowed. Children pressed their hands to the lanterns before letting them go. Ishan stood with them, his fists clenched. He had lost comrades, brothers, and sisters of battle. His voice was low but steady. "They wanted us to die forgotten, but we will carry their names in every fight. We will carve their sacrifice into the stars." The soldiers roared in agreement. Humanity's wounds were deep, but from those wounds came strength. Far away, the Vair, Hive studied. Their machines replayed the battle endlessly. They had predicted human tactics. They had accounted for human firepower, yet the Odyssey's sacrifice had torn their logic apart. Within the Vair's collective, thoughts flowed like cold rivers. One node pulsed with unease. Why do they give everything for no gain? Why do they choose death when survival is possible? Another answered. It is not survival they seek. It is meaning. This cannot be calculated. For the first time, the swarm was divided. Back on the Atlas, Mara gathered her commanders. She spread a star map across the table. Red markers glowed where the Vair spread like infection across the galaxy. "They are not finished," Mara said. "The rift was only their trap. They are preparing something larger. We must strike before they strike us." Her officers exchanged uneasy looks. The fleet was tired, their numbers smaller than before. Supplies were running low, yet none of them spoke of retreat. They had seen what sacrifice could do. Dr. Kira's eyes narrowed as she studied the map. "There," she said, pointing to a cluster of systems. "The Vair use this region to feed their swarm. If we strike their supply lines, we slow them." "We starve them," Ishan smirked grimly. "Good. Let them feel hunger for once." Mara nodded. "Then it's decided. We move." The journey through the rift was long and dangerous. The storms battered their shields, and debris tore at their hulls. Yet the fleet pressed on, guided by determination. Every crew member carried the memory of the Odyssey, and that memory lit their path. At night, when the stars outside glowed with eerie light, many spoke of Hale and his crew. They told stories of his bravery, his laughter, the way he stood unshaken even in despair. The Odyssey was no longer just a ship. It had become a symbol, and symbols were harder to destroy than steel. When they reached the Vair's supply hub, what they saw chilled them. Massive black stations floated in orbit around a dead star, harvesting energy and feeding it to the swarm. The stations pulsed like beating hearts, each one surrounded by ships. Mara's breath caught. If we cut these hearts, the swarm will falter. But the task was nearly impossible. The enemy ships outnumbered them 5-1. To strike meant certain loss. Silence filled the command deck. Every officer knew what such a battle would cost. Then, Ishan broke the silence. "We already lost the Odyssey. Do you think they would want us to turn away now?" "No," They would want us to finish what they started. Mara's jaw tightened. She felt Hale's voice in her memory. Every second we fight buys hope. She stood tall. Prepare the fleet. Tonight, we strike. The night before the battle, the humans did not rest. Families embraced. Friends clasped hands. Soldiers cleaned their weapons in silence. Dr. Kira wrote. In her journal, her words steady. The Ver believe sacrifice is weakness. Tomorrow we will show them it is strength. Even if we fall, our fall will shake the galaxy. Mara walked the corridors, speaking to her people. She offered no empty promises, only truth. The road ahead is dark, she said, but we walk it together. Whatever comes, we will meet it as one. Humanity does not bow. Cheers echoed through the halls. Far beyond, in the swarm's hive, the Ver prepared as well. Cold machines aligned their fleets, their calculations flawless. Yet deep within their collective, the question still lingered. Why do they fight without hope? And in that question lay a weakness the humans would soon use. The stage was set. Two forces stood on the edge of war, the perfect order of the Ver and the burning chaos of humanity. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The human fleet emerged from the storm with battered hulls and weary hearts, but their resolve was unshaken. Before them stretched the Ver's supply hub, vast stations glowing like blackened hearts around a dead star. Thousands of enemy ships moved in perfect formation, silent and merciless. Against them stood only humanity's fleet, scarred yet burning with determination. On the bridge of the Atlas, Captain Mara Solis stared at the sight. Her voice was calm, but her eyes carried steel. They outnumber us, but numbers are not everything. We carry something they cannot calculate. Ishan stood at his post, fists clenched. They think they've already won. Let's prove them wrong. Dr. Kira Den, seated by the tactical screens, spoke softly. Remember, their hive fears what it does not understand, and they do not understand us. The battle began with silence, then erupted in fire. Ver ships advanced in perfect symmetry, their black hulls gleaming with deadly precision. Human ships broke formation, darting through the field with unpredictable movements. The contrast was startling. Cold order against wild chaos. "Forward batteries, fire!" Mara commanded. The Atlas unleashed a storm of plasma and missiles. The Leviathan followed, its cannons tearing through the dark. Explosions painted the void with light as human weapons cut into the swarm. The Ver countered instantly. Lances of white energy speared through human shields, shattering smaller ships. The Nova's Hope took a direct hit, breaking apart into fragments that glowed briefly before vanishing into silence. A hush fell on the Atlas bridge, but Mara did not waver. For every ship we lose, we strike tenfold harder. Keep pressing. Amid the chaos, humanity's strength revealed itself. Unlike the Ver, who moved like machines, humans adapted. When a squadron was cornered, they feigned retreat, luring the enemy into a crossfire. When a ship's weapons failed, it turned itself into a decoy, drawing fire while allies struck from the shadows. Ishan shouted across the comms, rallying the fighters. "They think we are weak. Show them what it means to be human." Fighter pilots answered with fearless cries. They swarmed the Ver like sparks in a storm, weaving between colossal ships, planting mines, and tearing into weak points. Their losses were heavy, but their courage was heavier still. Inside the hive mind of the Ver, unease grew. Their calculations faltered as human tactics spiraled beyond reason. They do not preserve themselves. They burn themselves for victory. It is not logical. It is not survival. Then why do they prevail? The question echoed, and for the first time, doubt spread among them. Back on the Atlas, Dr. Kira studied the Ver stations. Their hub is linked. If we sever the energy lines here, she pointed at the glowing conduits, We crippled the swarm. But those lines are guarded by their heaviest ships, Ishan warned. It's suicide. Mara's voice cut through the air. Not suicide. Sacrifice, just like hail. She straightened, her decision clear. Form strike teams. We'll hit those conduits. If we fall breaking their heart. The crew answered with a roar of approval. The strike began. Small human ships darted toward the conduits, while the larger carriers created diversions. The Leviathan charged into enemy fire, shields collapsing, but guns blazing until the very end. It rammed a Veer destroyer, tearing both into flaming debris. Pilots flew with reckless brilliance. Some went down in flames, but others broke through, planting explosives along the conduits. When they detonated, light rippled across the stations, severing one of the glowing lines. The swarm shuddered, their formation faltering. Mara's voice rang across the fleet. One conduit down, keep pushing! But the Veer struck back with fury. Their beams tore through the starlight wing, reducing it to silence. Whole squadrons vanished in brilliant flashes. On the bridge, Kira's voice trembled as she whispered, We're losing too many. Mara placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Loss is the price of freedom. They gave us this chance. We must finish it. With every loss, humanity only grew more determined. At the heart of the battle, Ishan led a daring assault. His squadron broke through enemy lines, engines burning. Veer interceptors swarmed, but he pushed on, guiding his fighters straight toward the second conduit. We hit this, and they bleed, he shouted. One by one, his wingmates fell, ships bursting like dying stars. Only Ishan remained, his fighter heavily damaged, alarms screaming. But he pressed forward, ramming his ship into the conduit with a final cry, For Earth! The explosion ripped across the hub, tearing the second energy line apart. The swarm staggered, their order breaking into chaos. A cheer erupted across the fleet. Humanity was breaking the impossible, but the cost was unbearable. Half their ships were gone. Thousands of lives had already been lost. On the bridge of the Atlas, Mara stood tall, though her heart ached. We're not finished. The last conduit remains. If we take it, the swarm collapses. Kira shook her head, tears in her eyes. But we have almost nothing left to give. Mara's voice was quiet, yet unyielding. Then we give everything. As the final wave began, silence fell across the fleet. Families whispered last goodbyes. Soldiers gripped their weapons with steady hands. Children on the civilian decks clung to parents, listening to the rumble of engines. Mara spoke across the channels, her voice reaching every corner. This is not just for humanity. This is for every world the Veer would consume. If we fall tonight, let the galaxy remember we did not fall quietly. We fell blazing. The fleet answered with a single cry, a roar of defiance that cut across the stars. The humans charged. Their battered ships lit the void with fire, heading straight for the last conduit. And in the hive mind of the Veer, fear finally stirred. They will not stop. They will burn everything to ash, even themselves. How do you fight an enemy that does not fear death? The answer did not come. Only silence followed. The fire in the stars grew brighter. The final blow was near, and humanity, broken but unyielding, pressed forward into the jaws of fate. The battlefield was a sea of burning wreckage. Human ships floated broken, their fires casting strange light across the dead star. The Veer swarm, though wounded, still loomed large. Only a fraction of the human fleet remained, yet their hearts burned brighter than ever before. On the bridge of the Atlas, Captain Mara Solis stood tall, her uniform scorched and her face weary. Around her, the crew moved with quiet determination. They all knew what had to be done. The last conduit is ahead, Dr. Kira whispered, her voice heavy with sorrow. But it is guarded by their strongest ships. We may not survive the approach. Mara's eyes hardened. Then we do not survive. We win. The fleet gathered for what would be their final charge. Soldiers and pilots listened to Mara's broadcast, her voice steady, echoing across every surviving ship. Humanity has always been underestimated. They called us fragile, reckless, unworthy of the stars. But they never understood what makes us strong. It is not our ships. It is not our weapons. It is our will. Even in the face of death, we fight. And tonight, we fight not for survival alone, but for freedom. For every world threatened by this swarm. Her words carried like fire through the crews. Even those near death, bleeding and broken, raised their heads with pride. The charge began. Engines roared as the human fleet surged toward the last conduit. The Veer responded with merciless precision, beams of energy lancing through space. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes, but still the humans pressed forward. On the Atlas, alarms screamed as hull plates buckled. Mara gripped the console. "Push! Through! We only need one chance!" Fighters swarmed the enemy, weaving in chaotic patterns, sacrificing themselves to create openings. The swarm faltered as it struggled to predict their movements. Kira's eyes widened as she saw the readings. They are afraid, Mara, for the first time they are afraid. Amid the chaos, the voice of the Veer hive echoed across the comms, cold and alien. "Humans, cease. You burn yourselves to nothing. You cannot sustain this war. Yield, and your extinction may be swift." Mara replied, her voice fierce. "You still don't understand us. We are not afraid of death. We are afraid of chains." And with that, she gave the final order. "All ships, strike the conduit. Everything we have!" The last wave was a storm of fire. The Atlas led the charge, its guns blazing, its shields failing. The surviving cruisers followed, pouring every missile and plasma round into the conduit's defenses. One by one, the defenders fell. But so did the humans. The Iron Dawn was split in two. The Solace vanished in a flare of white light. The fleet was reduced to a handful of burning wrecks. Then came the moment. The Atlas, mortally wounded, drifted close enough. Mara stood tall on the bridge, eyes shining with quiet pride. She looked at Kira and whispered, "Tell Earth, we did not die in silence." The ship rammed forward, its core overloading. A brilliant explosion engulfed the conduit, ripping it apart in a storm of fire and light. Silence followed. Across the battlefield, the Veer swarm froze. Their perfect formations shattered. The hive mind fractured as its heart collapsed. Ships lost coordination, drifting helplessly. Some turned on each other in confusion, and in that silence, the surviving humans, few and broken, realized they had done the impossible. Kira, her face streaked with tears, whispered into the comms, "The conduits are gone. The swarm is breaking. Humanity has won." A cheer rose from the survivors, weak but fierce. It was the sound of a people who had given everything, yet still stood. But then came the twist. From the wreckage of the Atlas, faint signals pulsed. Kira frowned at the readings. Wait, there's more. The overloaded core had not only destroyed the conduit, it had transmitted something. A pattern woven into the energy wave. A human code. It spread through the swarm like fire through dry fields. The hive mind, so perfect and unyielding, had been infected, not with a weapon, but with humanity's greatest trait, individuality. The swarm began to splinter as fragments of the hive gained thoughts of their own. Confusion rippled across their ranks. Some ships even turned and fled, unwilling to fight any longer. "They're breaking apart," Kira breathed. "We didn't just defeat them. We changed them." For the first time in the history of the galaxy, the Veer hive mind was no longer whole, And it was because of humans, because of their stubborn will to be free, their refusal to surrender to control. The galaxy would never be the same. In the quiet aftermath, the surviving ships drifted among the wreckage. The stars seemed brighter, as if bearing witness to the sacrifice. Kira stood at the viewport, whispering into the silence. Mara, Ishan, Hale, all of them. They gave everything, but they lit a fire that will never die. She turned to the surviving crew, her voice steady. We carry their legacy now. Humanity is no longer just a member of the Alliance. Humanity is its heart. And far away, across 1,000 alien worlds, the story spread. Of a small species from a blue planet. Of fragile beings who stood against an unstoppable swarm. Of humans who burned themselves in the dark, not for glory, but for freedom. They were no longer underestimated. They were feared, respected, admired. The stars were quiet, but if one listened closely, it felt as though they whispered. Humanity did. Not fall, humanity blazed.